Jessica. For those of you who don't know me, I think a lot of you do, but for those of you who don't, I'm Jessica. My background is as a psychotherapist and doing lots of different mindfulness and somatic work. And I started incorporating a lot of what I understood and know from that world into teaching mindfulness. And a big reason for that was kind of noticing that both for myself and for lots of other people, sometimes mindfulness doesn't feel as accessible as it can, as it should be, as it could be for some people. And I'll kind of go into a little bit more detail as to what that might be about. So kind of the first little bit of this, not for too long, I'm going to talk about stuff to do with mindfulness, and then we're just going to do things for most of the workshop. But the first bit's just kind of going to be me talking. If that's not stuff you're interested in, because it's the kind of neuroscience-y bit, it's nothing deep or heavy or too complex, please feel free not to kind of listen, or just to go and grab a cup of tea or something. It isn't everybody's favourite part. But I really like to kind of make it clear what it is that I'm doing and why I'm doing it. So the thing I always kind of start with is having choice. So like I said, you've got choices to have your camera on, your camera off. At the end, when I invite people to speak, you can do this in the chat box, you can just stay and be silent. Don't feel like there's anything that you sort of have to do. And in terms of the activities, the same thing goes. Please don't do anything that doesn't feel comfortable for you, whether it's physically, mentally, emotionally. That's actually probably the biggest part of this, in a way, is not feeling like I will know what will feel right for you, but just assuming that you will know that. I'm going to have a sip of my water, sorry. So just really kind of being mindful not to do anything that really doesn't feel safe or feels too uncomfortable. I think it's okay to feel a little bit uncomfortable, but I think this workshop is all around kind of finding ways to practice mindfulness inside that window where we feel comfortable enough, rather than feeling really overwhelmed or disconnected. If you do start to feel really overwhelmed or disconnected, please, take a moment out, look around the space that you're in, walk around, have a little sort of bob about, go and get a cold glass of water, do whatever feels good for you when you feel agitated or shut down or anything like that usually. Don't carry on doing something that feels a bit horrible or gross or uncomfortable in some way. So the first thing I'm going to do, and I think I've done this for those of you who've come to other workshops, is just in the simplest way, because mindfulness is, there's so many texts and it's been around really for thousands of years, and it can be a wonderfully complex thing. But my favourite explanation that I've come across is a really, really simple one, which is that mindfulness has these three components. And I'm going to explain things in different ways, so I'm hoping that they'll land for different people depending on how you understand stuff. For me, I quite like sort of visual stuff, so I imagine it like an aeroplane, and to sort of fly in that mindful space, I'm going to need the body, the central body, which is the noticing. So central part of mindfulness is noticing what's happening right now in this moment, outside of yourself, inside of yourself, just noticing what's happening. And then there are these two other components that I think of as like the wings that kind of stabilize that noticing. And this sort of half of it is about being non-judgmental. And I think a lot of terms in mindfulness for some of us can feel a bit kind of vague. And I think for me, when I think about being non-judgmental, it's really about not leaning towards or leaning away from. So if we were listening to sounds, for example, we might have a tendency to go, oh, I don't like that sound. It's a pneumatic drill from the building site across the road. But I really like that sound because it's a lovely tinkly bell music sound. And I think there's this kind of idea in mindfulness that we're supposed to be having this sort of lovely experience. So we want to lean towards the tinkly bell sounds or whatever. I don't like tinkly bells, but if you like tinkly bells, maybe you lean towards them. So the idea with not judging is just noticing it. It's not we like it, we don't like it, it's fun, it's boring, it's horrible, it's good, it's bad. And we will do that because that's absolutely what the human brain does, millisecond to millisecond. It kind of keeps you alive, all that judging. It's meant to happen. But the sort of developing the ability to sort of notice and step back from that judgment is a big part of what mindfulness helps us develop in our life when we practice more, which is why I want it to be something that more and more people can do. Because that not judging and just noticing is what allows us to be a little bit less reactive. So we don't just react to things and go, I don't like that person, I don't like this situation, but we can kind of slow down a little bit when we're just noticing and going, oh, that's interesting, there's a judgment there. But when we're noticing in our mindfulness practice, it's really just sort of thinking, can I pull away from that judging part and just notice it's just a sound, not a good sound or a bad sound, it's just a sound, if we were talking about that one sensation that we can notice. And the other side, and this again, the term that's often used, so we've got the noticing as the central body of mindfulness, and then we've got the not judging. And the other half is this bit that a lot of people refer to as self-compassion. And that's great. And if you get that, wonderful, I'm really glad, because it's a lovely thing to have. But I often also think it's another term that for me and for some people, we kind of go, well, you know, what does that really involve? And what does that mean to have self-compassion? Or people will just say, you know, see if you can engender some feelings of self-compassion. Or I know I've been in mindfulness classes where I thought, I don't know what that really means, or what it is that I'm supposed to be doing. And so over the years, I've kind of come more around to this idea of being friendly towards. So whatever it is that I'm noticing, the sounds, the sensations, the feelings, the thoughts, all of the things that encompass this present moment that I might be noticing, I'm going to be as friendly towards those experiences as I can. If I do find myself judging something, I'm not going to be like, oh, you're so stupid. She said not to judge. What are you judging for? That's not friendly. That's not how we would be towards someone that we felt kind and loving towards, like a really good friend that we really liked. We would be more likely to go, oh, hey, you're judging. And, you know, it's sort of like part of the practice is to move away from that. You know, maybe we could put that down for a moment, but, you know, no worries that you did that. We're going to be friendly. And so sort of thinking about those two arms of not judging, and whatever it is that's happening, whether it's outside, the sounds, or inside, our sensations, our thoughts, our feelings, we're just being friendly towards them. So that kind of inner voice that we have that can tend towards being quite critical, we're going to see if we can move towards friendliness. And again, if you're someone who's got a really loud inner critic, this is going to be built into your neural pathways. So you're not going to sit here with me for an hour or so today and go, yeah, I was totally non-judgmental and super friendly to myself and totally present in the moment. It's absolutely okay if that's not what's happening for you. It's really about sort of considering that this is what we're moving towards in mindfulness. And if we get it for a few seconds at a time, that's it. That's fantastic. That's amazing. You have achieved mindfulness. The idea that we can sit for 45 minutes and practice this stuff and never fall into not noticing or judging or not being very friendly, it's not really very real, especially when our brains are kind of have been leaning into those things for many, many, many years for many of us. So that's that kind of first bit of like, okay, well, what is it that we're trying to do today? We're trying to practice mindfulness. And there's, so I'm going to do a screen share, and I think, you know, I'm constantly complaining about this, but Zoom has changed the way I changed the way I share my screen. So it's got a couple more steps to it, which I'm never a fan of. So I'm going to do a little screen share, and there we go. I'm going to show you this. So you don't have to lean in and read it. I'm putting it there. You may or may not like having a PowerPoint. Some people really like it. I'm happy to send it out afterwards. If you like having something to remind you of the information, please just, in fact, I'll just send it to everybody and then you've kind of got it. So some people don't like it, don't look at it. Some people do, have a look, but don't kind of get lost in it because it's a lot of just words really, isn't it? So the reason I want to share this is because we talk about noticing a lot in mindfulness and meditation. And my sort of sense is that sometimes we don't really think about what noticing really involves. And it's actually quite complex. And there's a lot of our brains and our nervous systems that are involved in this process. So the thing that I think we think of a lot when we think of noticing is our sort of our cognitive noticing, our sort of perception, we might sort of call it. But our cognitive noticing really involves using the sort of frontal part of the brain, and it's very language based, and it gives a narrative to our experience. It notices things through this sort of cognitive, quite clever we might think, sense of the world. This is what we're seeing this through. But there are these other ways that we notice the world and ourselves in it as well. And interoception, if you like the kind of language around it, is another one. And interoception is really our ability to have an awareness of what's going on inside our bodies. So not outside in the world as much, but inside our bodies. So for some of us, that can feel really intense and acute. And for some of us, that can actually feel really difficult to get any kind of sense of. So our interoception is another way of noticing. We may or may not have access to lots of these things. And that's okay as well. These are just ways that we notice. Proprioception is about sort of knowing where your body is. So proprioception is often something they talk about improving when we do things like yoga. So if you kind of raised your arms out to either side, but you couldn't, I can see myself, you see, so I can cheat. So if you don't have a mirror and you can't cheat, you might be like this, but you might think, no, yeah, my hands are at the same height. So really great proprioception is these kind of yoga teachers. They've got no mirrors and they're absolutely, you know, they're there at the exact, I don't think my arms are at the same height even when I've got a mirror, but so proprioception is our ability to notice without looking with our eyes where our body is in sort of space and what position it's in. And the neuroception, I think, is the sort of particularly interesting way that we perceive the world, that we experience the world. So I think neuroception was actually a term coined by Stephen Porges, who is a neuroscientist who does lots of interesting work around this kind of stuff. So this is where our nervous system, that is our autonomic nervous system in particular, that's running through our whole body, is perceiving our experience both inside our bodies and outside of our bodies. So this is like I'm doing this because I kind of see it as like a sensor, you know, it's kind of going beep, 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 beep. It's trying to pick up data from out in the world, but it's also picking up data from inside our own bodies, our brains, our heart rates, our stomachs, all this stuff going on. And it's sending signals to our brain all the time, a lot faster than cognition. In fact, cognition is 6 seconds slower than everything else. So it's always useful to know all this other stuff is happening a lot more quickly. Cognition this is a weighty part of the brain. It takes a lot to run it. It's happening slowly. Neuroception is where our nervous system is kind of looking for threat. It's looking to see if we're safe enough out in the world, and that might be sounds and other people and things that we can see. It might also be stuff that's going on in the inside of our bodies, you know, if there was pain or discomfort. Our thoughts as well, you know, can kind of influence all of this quite quickly. And the nervous system can start to think, you know, there's evidence to show that if I were to sit like this for a good 2 minutes, all scrunched up and kind of hunched forward, the musculature of my body would be sending signals via my nervous system up to my brain that I wasn't safe. So it's really useful to know that these are the ways that we notice the world. This isn't as perhaps as kind of simple as when I say notice, or we hear that in a meditation or a mindfulness workshop or class. Perhaps it's not quite as kind of simple as we imagine it might be. And all of these things in all of us, we might have, in a sense, like I sort of think like different skill levels. You know, like we might have really sensitive nervous systems that pick up threat, but also perhaps pick up calming signals really easily and really quickly. And some people's nervous systems are sort of, they're kind of not hearing, you know, it's like they're kind of going, huh, did you say that was dangerous? Or did you say that was lovely and calming? And it's hard for some people's nervous systems to hear. Or like I say, they're really acutely, you know, got this amazing hearing system and they can hear everything, in which case they might think things are dangerous or risky when perhaps they're not. They're just a bit loud for our nervous system. And this just can be useful to know if you get a bit kind of either shut down or overwhelmed when you're practicing mindfulness. So I suppose the next bit is kind of thinking, so what shuts down noticing? Because I think that's one of the problems is, so we go into mindfulness, we go into meditation, we've got an app or we go to a class or whatever it is, and we come out at the end and we go, well, I just spent the whole thing asleep, or don't remember any of it, or we kind of go, oh yeah, I just felt so anxious and agitated, I really couldn't be with anything other than that. I know when I was really young, I was in a meditation class once, and I literally, all I felt like was there was someone screaming inside my head. You know, it was so intense for me, because my nervous system is an incredibly sensitive one, that the sitting really still and just doing the sort of noticing the breath stuff, but for that length of time, my nervous system perceived as really loud and really overwhelming, and started doing this kind of like threat, alarm response. So I wasn't really able to notice. I was just actually feeling pretty unpleasant. It was pretty unpleasant. So yeah, I guess it's kind of thinking, so what's happening for some of us when we go to notice and we're struggling? And I'm going to show you this in two ways. And again, it's because people understand things in different ways. So if you don't understand the first bit, I'm going to explain it in a slightly different way afterwards. So again, for those of you who know me, you'll kind of know the hand model of the brain. And those of you who don't, this is the hand model of the brain. It's from another neuroscientist called Siegel, who's also really worth checking out. So if you imagine, and again, so this is an imagining thing, and if that's not for you, then this is the explanation that will suit you. But if you imagine that your hand is your brain, so I've taken my brain out of my head, and here it is. Yeah, this is my brain, and this is my body. Okay, so if you curl your thumb into your palm, and you can do this, or you can watch me doing it, whatever you prefer, and you curl your fingers over your thumb. Sometimes it's easier to understand if you're doing it yourself. Sometimes it's nicer to see me doing. This is your human brain. So I've sort of plucked my brain out of my head, and here's my human brain. These four fingers here that are wrapped over, they're kind of representing this front part of my brain. So that's that cognitive perception part, and it does all that sort of clever kind of noticing that gives narrative and thinking, and you know, all of this real, like, you know, it's the stuff that supposedly makes humans so wonderfully clever. I always say supposedly, because I do sometimes wonder if perhaps that's a bit of a myth, an ego thing, isn't it, that we're so clever? But anyway, it's another thing. So if you uncurl your fingers, you've got your thumb. And this is a really simple view of the brain. The brain is way more complex than this, but just for simplicity's sake, for understanding this stuff, we'll say that this thumb is the middle part of the brain. Sometimes people talk about the limbic system. And this part of the brain kind of does, like, say, sort of feelings and memories and sensations and stuff like that. So it's emotional feelings, but feelings in the body and things like that. So this is what it's dealing with on the whole. It does also interact a little bit with this part of the brain. And this is the back brain. So this is at the back here, the very back of your head. And this is a really simplistic part of the brain. It does fight, flight, and freeze. And you may or may not have heard of those. They are the threat responses. So these are the responses that we have available to us when our nervous system perceives threat in some way, whether it's inside our body, thoughts, feelings, or outside. So like me in that meditation class, I started to go offline. These parts of the brain became unavailable, and I was probably going into a bit of a fight. I was tensing up. I felt like, oh, this kind of real, this was where I went to, okay? So when we see something that feels our brain and our nervous system, for whatever reason, has decided is a little bit, it's like, that's not quite right. And it might be a sensation in our own body. It might be something that's happening outside. It might be that it's triggered a memory from the past. Sitting very still with our eyes closed often does that for a lot of people. And that kind of meaning-making part of the brain that's got all this kind of sensible storyline stuff and context and negotiation, it becomes unavailable to us. And we then are left with fight, flight, and freeze. So I can do a little screen share to just show you again a different way of kind of looking at this. So this is something that was kind of, it doesn't really matter, does it? There was a few neuroscientists involved in kind of creating something called polyvagal theory, mainly Stephen Porges, again, if you're interested. So this is what's kind of happening in our nervous system. This is just perhaps a different way of looking at this hand model. If that's a difficult way to understand it, I wanted to lay this out on a PowerPoint in words for those of you who kind of access information a little bit more differently. So you know, when we do fight, flight and freeze, the signals to do that are going down through the nervous system into the body. And these are the things that are taking place. Those signals are then also traveling back up. This is a two-way thing. We can move our bodies in different ways, which is, in a sense, what I'm going to be doing with you today, which is about moving our bodies and shifting our bodies and our breathing and our eyes and things like that, that will hopefully keep us, as I'm pointing to my own screen, like you can see what I'm pointing at, which is silly. I'm hoping that a lot of what I'll do with you today is going to send a signal via your nervous system up to your brain to keep you up here at the top of the ladder, to keep you online, so that as much of your noticing ability, whatever that is for you, and we're all different in our noticing abilities, is available to you. That's the idea. We're going to do things that will move and shift some of this kind of heart rate stuff, the muscle tone stuff, and our eyes are a fantastic thing to play with because they're a wonderful extension of the human brain. But my hope is some of the things we'll do, you're going to like, and it will move you up to the top of this ladder where you feel much more able to notice your experience. I'm really hoping that at some or most of that made sense. There is space, like I say, at the end to ask questions. And I'm always really happy for people to reach out to me with questions, or if it was like, oh, that name of that person was interesting, but I haven't written that down. You can always get in. I don't stop existing once the workshop's over. You can always get in touch with me. So that was the bit of today that was really me kind of telling you the reasons why I'm doing things in the way that I'm doing them, rather than just sitting very still and asking you to notice. The reason I'm doing things a little bit differently is because I can kind of see that some people will not find that noticing is available to them when they're just sitting still with their eyes closed. What are the things that can make this be more likely for you? I suppose very quickly I would just say, you might have experienced trauma in the past. You might be someone who has a sensory processing difference. You might be someone who's just experiencing an enormous amount of prolonged and high stress states. All of these things can mean that your neuroception, your nervous system, becomes either acutely sensitive or sort of less sensitized. And some people swing around as well. Sometimes it's acutely sensitive, other times it's like didn't pick up anything. You know, and whatever the reasons for you sort of struggling to stay in the noticing place, yeah, I hope that some of these things will be useful. As I said at the beginning, please only do what feels as comfortable to you as possible. So this isn't about never feeling a bit uncomfortable, a bit of that anxiety. It's about knowing that if you notice, oh, I'm feeling a bit uncomfortable, I'm feeling a bit anxious, or I'm feeling a bit agitated. If you notice, then you're at least still partially here. You're partially online. You're online enough to be doing some noticing. So that's okay. What we're wanting to avoid is the kind of completely going off and not doing any noticing at all. And that is very likely to happen because noticing is really, really hard work for modern Western brains. And for most brains, to be honest with you, for modern human beings, the idea of being present in this current moment is really, really hard for us. And whatever we do a lot of, our brain gets very used to doing, and it's what it does well. So what it tends not to do well is notice stuff, is be present in this moment. And the critical stuff and the non-judging stuff, we're not great at that either, but then we're not encouraged to either, are we? And the systems within which we live tend to be pretty critical, pretty harsh, pretty judgmental, not very friendly. So that's what we end up doing inside our heads too. So to start, the first thing that I want to do is, and again, for those of you who've done other things, some of what I'm doing you might have done before, but I'm going to hopefully do some new things as well, is playing around with the eyes. So as I said, the eyes are, and we forget this, but the eyes are actually exposed parts of the human brain, which I always think that's just cool. You know, that's, for me, some people might think that's really gross. For me, I think, wow, that's really cool. So what we do with our eyes via the optic nerve really influences what our brain is doing. But the other thing is, I want to kind of show you a few options that you might take away with you to other spaces, other mindfulness classes, or yoga, or Feldenkrais, or anywhere where we're generally told to close our eyes as a way to come into noticing, or as a way to become calm. And closing our eyes isn't always something that feels like it helps us to feel calm. Actually, for some of us it leaves us feeling disconnected, like the freeze state, or really agitated, like a fight or flight. So the first thing I'll show you, it's one of my favorites, and for anyone who spends a lot of time on a computer, I would encourage you to do this as often as possible anyway. If you reach your arms out to either side of you, what we're looking for here, and you can kind of move your hands sort of forwards and backwards and wiggle your fingers. And what we're trying to do here is find our peripheral vision. So as far back, and you can kind of you can see what I'm doing now, but start to let your eyes drift just above your screen line. So you're not looking at the screen anymore. What you're looking for is your peripheral vision. So as I pull back this far, I can't see my hands anymore. But if I wiggle my fingers and move them in slowly, I can, oh yeah, I can see my hands. Great. And this is your peripheral vision. This is when your eyes are taking in, we kind of think of as like the whole field of your vision. You're not staring at one point. Staring has a tendency over a prolonged period of time to trigger your threat response. So you don't want to be doing it for too long. So if you draw out, you can kind of come in and out a few times. You might notice your eyelids start to drop a little bit. You might feel like you can let your hands down. Your arms might, my arms are quite tired. Your arms might get a little bit tired. You can let them drop down. And just see if you can hold that kind of whole field of vision. So you're not looking at any one object or place in space, but you're kind of allowing your eyes to kind of very sleepily and lazily see as much of the space in front of you as possible. The screen just becomes one thing inside of that. And if you need to use your fingers to kind of keep that, please do. You might kind of do it and let your elbows drop down a bit to kind of move away from the feeling arm tired. So with all of the movement stuff that I'm going to do, I will say, do it as small and as effortlessly as possible. So just let your eyes rest for a moment in peripheral vision. You don't have to do anything else at this point. We're just doing something different with our eyes. Okay, so another option with your eyes throughout everything we're doing, you can do peripheral vision, is you can lower your eyelashes and your eyelids and just look out through your eyelashes. And this can be quite kind of halfway, so you can still see most of the detail out in the world, in your room, in your space. Or you can lower your eyelids so far down that really what you can see is just the little kind of motes and shapes and patterns of light through your lashes. But there's still something coming in. And for those of us where the stillness behind the eyelids is actually quite overwhelming or underwhelming, this can be quite a useful option. The other two options are absolutely the ones that you're going to hear a lot, which is eyes lowered to the point just above your knees if you're seated, and eyes closed. So you've got 4 options, and you can kind of move between the 4 and think, well, which one right now, and that might change moment to moment over the course of the hour, over the course of the next 10 minutes. Which one do my eyes feel most drawn to just right now, just for a moment? So is it peripheral vision? Or does it feel nice to just be looking out through the lashes? Or to lower the head slightly and look down a couple of feet ahead of the half a meter ahead of the knees? Or perhaps closed eyes does feel really lovely for you today, to just let the eyelids completely rest. All 4 of those options, and of course, the 5th option, which is completely open and looking at whatever you want, is also absolutely available to you. So that's just the first bit of kind of showing you what you can do with your eyes throughout the session at any other time as well. And the peripheral vision, like I say, I really advise you do often if you stare a lot at screens and stuff. So the next thing, and again, this is going to kind of involve you can do it sitting where you are or laying down, but you can also get up and move around the space that you're in. So this is really just an opportunity for you to look around the space that you're in today. And so you can start that by literally just kind of, turning your head or your upper body, maybe looking up or looking down. You might stand up and move around the space that you're in. If you do stand up and move around, try to do it again effortlessly and just really slowly. So we're still we're with the eyes, we're with taking things in visually, and we're just starting to see what we can notice out there in the space that you're in. And I would encourage you not to look at the objects in your room that you know are there, because that tends to be where we quite naturally let our eyes land. But to sort of look at the things in between, the spaces in between objects, or the patterns of light and shadow on your walls or floor or ceiling. Looking perhaps at things you wouldn't normally notice, a wire, the edge of a drawer, the side of a light switch. This isn't about finding the things that you like or the things that you're drawn to, but sort of noticing all of those spaces in between things. And noticing their textures. Are the things that you're seeing rough or smooth? If you were to touch them, would they be warm or cold? So just letting your mind kind of wander about those places where your eyes are landing, the spaces in between the objects that you know so well in your space. Just seeing what happens with that noticing, and whether or not it shifts towards wanting to see certain things and not others. There might be mess, there might be things you haven't wanted to look at. So there's the opportunity in a way to look at the spaces around those things. Just notice the textures, colours, shades of those things, not the meaning of them as such, not the judgments that we place, the mess, the work, the projects, the meaning that things have, but just seeing if we can notice the shape of something, the edge, the corner. Is it sharp? Is it smooth? Is it soft? So just noticing the space that you're in for a moment or two more. And again, with as little effort and work and as slowly as possible, kind of letting that type of noticing go for a moment. And we're just going to do one or maybe two, we'll see, little eye movements that I think can be quite useful, interesting for some people sometimes. If you feel uncomfortable when you're doing them, please don't. So if you want to kind of come back to a place where you can see me for a moment, I'm gonna take my hand and I'm gonna make two fingers with it. So it's like, this is my drawing pen, and the lines that I draw with my pen, my eyes are going to follow. So the first line that I'm going to draw and follow is that I'm going to just draw from left to right along my horizon line, so my side line, so I'm not looking down or looking up, along my side line. And I'm just going to follow that with my eyes. And I might kind of slow that down, and I might make the line quite small actually. So just drawing from left to right, just for a moment or two. This can be quite a quick tool if you like it. It does some quite interesting things in the brain. It's a bilateral movement. So we're kind of bringing the brain online because we're having to do something that seems very simple, but it's actually quite complex to our brain. And then letting that one go. And the other movement that we can do with our eyes is we're going to need like a kind of box in front of us. So again, this is a one with imagining, but I'm going to draw this sort of size box out in front of me. So you're going to move your hands inside this kind of size in front of you, okay? And I'm going to place my drawing fingers, and I'll show you first, and then we'll do it, into the center of the box. And this is, my eyes are going to follow my drawing fingers from the center of the box to the corner and back down. So I'm not moving my head. I'm moving from the center of the box to the corner and back. And I'm just letting my eyes follow the tips of my fingers. And then we're going to go to the other top side of the box. So from the center of that box, the center of the screen, you might think, to the corner, you're just letting your eyes follow the tips of your fingers. And then we're going to go from the center to the bottom. Yeah. So we're going from the center to this bottom, and we're letting our eyes follow, without moving our heads, the tips of our fingers. And then the last corner of the box, we're just going to draw down from the center to the lower corner. Just going to do that a few times. Maybe just one more time. And we're going to let that go. So if you find yourself sort of struggling to be in any kind of noticing, moving the eyes can be quite a useful thing to do. And another really sort of quick little interrupter, which is a breath, another neuroscientist called Andrew Huberman, did lots of research on breathing and found that this really simple breathing way of breathing kind of forces the nervous system back into its equilibrium quite quickly. I always notice that my dog does it, so I sort of think, well, they know what they're doing with their nervous system. So it's 2 sort of sniffs in. So one breath that would normally be a solid breath in becomes interrupted in the middle and finished. So it's, and then it's a sigh out of the mouth. So literally just practice 2 or 3 of those in your own spaces. So we're just, maybe one more. And these little interrupters are just ways for us to, I guess, kind of come back if we wandered off, that's all. So we're going to do another breathing, and we're going to just notice what's happening when we're doing it. And some people really like this and some people really don't. So we'll see how you go. So the breathing is going to be breathing in and humming out. So it's something like this. This is, and again, you're in your own space. I hope it's relatively private and you feel comfortable. So we're breathing in and we're humming out. For the whole out breath, okay? And for the first one, we're going to cup our hands over our ears. Now that can be pretty intense. So if you don't like it, take the hands away from the ears. But notice your preference. Notice what happens for you. Breathe in and hum out. Maybe just 2 more like that, or off altogether. Just notice the sensations inside your head, if any. I often get a bit of a buzzing in my tongue. And then just placing some of your fingers on your throat if you'd like to, and humming and seeing if you can feel it there. Your pitch might be really different to mine, and that's okay. This is my humming pitch. Just remembering where you want your eyes to be while you do this. One more here. Just noticing the sensation, what's happening in your chest and your face and your head as you hum. And if you'd like to, you can place a hand over this upper part of the chest and see if you can feel the sensation of humming there. You may or may not. It's always a harder one for me to feel. And then if there's a preference for you, if you're noticing there's one place you can feel the sensations, the buzzing of that hum somewhere, maybe nowhere with your hands, maybe your ears or your throat or the upper part of your chest, just choosing that for a few more breaths. Humming really speaks to our nervous system and calms it down a little sometimes. Just picking the one that you like. Letting that go for a moment. Wherever you'd like your eyes to land, in that kind of wide open vision, or eyelashes, or lowered gaze, or closed eyes, wherever feels comfortable for you. Just seeing if there's any remnants of that buzzing in your face or your tongue or your hands, your throat or your head. Just noticing those places. There might be nothing there. There might be no sensation at all. And there might be lots, or somewhere in between. There isn't a right amount of sensation to find there. We're just taking our noticing self to those places for a moment. And remembering there, we're not judging what we find, what we notice, if we can. And trying to approach noticing in a friendly way. So noticing if there's a judging coming up or an unfriendliness, to noticing the places where your humming happened. And again, just letting that go, let go of that noticing for a moment. And maybe do one of those interrupted breaths, so it's kind of 2 sniffs and a sigh. So it's maybe another one. A nice loud sigh out. And then the next sort of noticing exercise. So there's going to be quite a bit of moving from one thing to the next. We're not going to stay with anything too long. We might stay a bit longer nearer the end, but we're going to use different ways of noticing. The noticing is always, but the activities will be relatively short. You don't have to get too stuck in anything or worry too much about how long we'll be doing something. But I'd like you to just, again, sort of wherever you are, if you might have moved or you're sitting or standing, to just glance briefly around the space that you're in and reach for any object in your environment. I've got one of these kind of really lovely juicy rubber things that I rest my wrists on when I type. It'd be a glass or just the surface of a table or your own chair. So just land on any object. There is no right object to have chosen. And once you've landed on an object you've chosen, I'm just going to ask you to explore it. Right? So if it's not something you've done a great deal of, that can feel a bit odd. But the way I've had it explained to me sometimes that I quite like is that I'm going to have to describe this object to someone later who has never seen or touched one before. And I need to give them as much information as I can. So I'm gonna notice this object as if I'm them, as if I'm someone who's never come across this object before. So often we have something in our homes or on our desks or the desk itself, and it's not until perhaps we really look at it, and then perhaps you can also start to explore this object with your hands, that we really perhaps notice things that we hadn't seen or felt or were unexpected. So we're just going to take a few moments to explore this chosen object. And again, it's really easy for, the judgments of what or why, or I don't know what I'm looking for or what I'm doing. And then unfriendliness can come in, the critical voice can come in there. And that's absolutely fine, and that's absolutely normal. That's most of us, most of the time. Like I said, the judging part of us keeps us alive because it's looking for things that might be dangerous all the time. It just has a tendency to get a bit out of control, that's all. And the unfriendliness in us is usually a mirror of things out in the world that we've learned. So just coming to that object with as kind of innocent eyes and hands as you possibly can. What are the sensations? Again, in the same way we explored your space. Is it rough? Is it smooth? What kinds of edges does it have, if any? Noticing the colours, perhaps noticing the way it interacts with other objects around it, on it or near it. So we're trying not to kind of label it as good or bad or useful or unuseful or nice, or wishing perhaps we'd chosen a different, more interesting object. But just allowing our eyes and any other part of you, your hands, your wrists, your forearms. You might like to lean down and smell this object. It's entirely up to you how you explore or gather data about this object. If you are at all academic, you might imagine that you have to write a paper on this object, but not on what it does or where it's been in the past or where it will be in the future, but only in how this object is experienced right now through your body. So not through your judging self. Is it cool or warm? If you just lay your hands very still for a moment onto that object, letting the eyes be again in peripheral or through the lashes or lowered or closed. What happens if you just let your hands lay or rest still on the object or with the object in your hands? Does anything about it change? Do you notice anything new? Or nothing at all? All of those things are pieces of information, even the nothing at all. There will be no test. You don't have to describe this object to me or anyone else, really. And then just letting go of noticing that object. Coming back, if you like, that little breath, maybe doing one or two. And if you're sitting, just placing your feet onto the floor If you're lying and you want to remain lying, you could shuffle up somewhere where your feet could be against, I don't know, a firm cushion or a wall or the side of a sofa. So wherever you are, sort of trying to find somewhere where your feet can be kind of flat against something. And we're just going to press gently through our left foot and let that go. And press gently through the right foot and let that go. So there's just a little bit of pressure. We're just pushing into the floor, into the surface and releasing. You might notice that it creates a bit of sort of tension or strength up through that leg. You move between your left leg and your right leg. Try not to go too fast. Try not to make too much effort. You know, we're not sort of really pushing. It's not exercise. We're just pressing a little bit just to get a bit of sensation, if we can, through our feet, our lower legs, maybe even up into our hips, our bum, our lower belly. And see when you press, is there sensation or not so much? And again, we might have lots of sensation or very little, or somewhere in the middle. We might not be able to know whether it's a lot or a little. But whatever you find there is yours to notice. And often when we make the movement smaller and more gentle, there's kind of, I always think there's like a sweet spot for your nervous system. The sweet spot of a little bit of movement, a little bit of the way we notice, is where we're not doing it with such strength that actually it is actually a little bit overwhelming, and we're not doing it so quietly that we can't really hear or feel or sense anything. The nervous system likes things to be just right, for it not to get overwhelmed or underwhelmed and stop noticing altogether. And it's kind of, we've got a choice then to find out what that is for us. So just pressing through the left and through the right. And just noticing what happens there. Where's the amount of pressure that gives your mind, your noticing self, somewhere to go? You might prefer to press both feet now as well. So kind of letting go of that bilateral left-right movement, pressing both feet at the same time. And see if you're pressing and it's quite strong and the strength is moving all the way up through your legs, see if you might like to explore pressing a little bit more gently. And vice versa, if you're pressing really gently, might you like to see what it's like to press a little bit more. Looking for the place where it doesn't feel like really hard work, but there's enough of something happening that it can keep our noticing selves anchored in a place where our noticing self can land. Just enough happening, but only just. And noticing perhaps as well, do you prefer to press through the balls of your feet, the heels of your feet, outer or inner edges? Is it possible to sort of move around those different places and see? And then just letting go of that pressing with the feet and seeing if there's anything left of the movement. So just noticing now the feet and the lower legs. Is there any sensation there? And again, it's not about if there is or isn't, that's a good thing or a not good thing, but just looking for data. in a friendly way. And we're going to do something similar but different, but with the hands. And you can do this standing or sitting, or I think you could do this laying down, especially if you propped yourself up a little bit. I'm going to stand so that you can see me really, really easily. If you do stand, make sure you're just really comfortable. You're not sort of, legs together or really far apart, or you've got a little bit of bounce in your knees and you're comfortable. And what we're going to do, some of you might know this one with me before, is we're just going to place our hands down at about waist height. If you are someone who likes to imagine or visualize, you can imagine perhaps a lake, water, placing your hands on the surface of water. And if you're not, it also really doesn't matter. Just place your hands down. And we're looking for not completely floppy and not like really rigid hands either. We're looking for somewhere in between the two. I always sort of imagine, I don't play the piano, but perhaps how a really kind of delicate piano player might let their hands be. It's quite a watery sort of movement. Just sort of placing your hands down and very slowly starting to move your hands from left to right. And be mindful what happens, because sometimes quite quickly we start to tense up our fingers or kind of get really floppy, and just to kind of keep the sensation alive in the hands, it's nice to be somewhere in between the two. We're just moving our hands from left to right. It's nothing special. You might be doing a much smaller movement than me, or you might be really, wanting to move all the way around. And again, if you think about letting your nervous system listen, so for me, if I do big, fast movements going all the way around, my nervous system quite quickly goes, oh, that's a lot of information. And I don't think it's really listening. So I tend to, it isn't the same every day either, it can change. Sometimes I need that. Sometimes my nervous system is got its volume down real low and it can't hear. And so I need to do the big, perhaps faster movements. So we're exploring where our nervous system might be able to listen without being under, like, I'm not listening at all, I'm going to sleep, I'm checking out, or overwhelmed. Oh, this is really a lot of information and it feels uncomfortable or agitating. So again, think about what your eyes are doing. Are they lowered? Are they looking at your hands? You might kind of look ahead and do peripheral vision and not look at the hands moving. If you can, let go of any effort elsewhere, so try not to make too much effort in the upper arms or the shoulders or the face. Not exercise, just some little movement to see what it's like to explore the hands. Just exploring your hands and how much movement you might like to do with them. Finding that window where we can get a bit of sensory feedback, some data to notice without being over or underwhelmed. Just check in, like how loud is your judging or your unfriendliness, or maybe it's not there. Maybe it's gone, checked out for a while. I'm wanting to do my hands a little bit more low now because the ache in my arms comes in, And just starting to let that movement go, but placing your hands somewhere, and that might be in your lap, it might be out ahead of you on your desk or the arms of a chair or alongside you if you're laying down. And just see, what's happening there in your hands now. Is there any sensation? Is there some sort of tingling or numbness or nothing at all? Just noticing what's happening in the hands for a moment or two. And then letting that noticing of the hands go. Again, maybe we do that little sniffing breath once or twice. So just you can do that anytime you like as well, not just when I say, or not at all, whatever your preference. So one of the things that is often used in mindfulness teaching, mindfulness classes, is the body scan. And I think it can be great and really interesting for many people, and for many of us some of the time. For some of us, body scans will always tip us into a really agitated, fearful place, or kind of falling asleep, disconnected, not present place. We're not going to do a whole body scan, but a sort of a head and face scan. I'm actually going to take my glasses off for this one. If you wear glasses, you might want to take them off just for a little while. And I'll describe what I'm doing in case that means you really can't see me. I'll describe it pretty well verbally. So often when we do traditional body scans, we are asked to notice a place in the body without perhaps much feedback from that place. And I think when you think back to what I showed you noticing involves, that can be quite difficult for a lot of us, either because looking at places in the body triggers all sorts of memories and agitation and fear and anger and distress, or because the way we take sensory data in means it's overwhelming or underwhelming. So whatever the reasons are, sometimes checking out places in the body can be really tricky, just noticing it with what people often call our mind's eye. I'm not always sure 100%, but anyway, our mind's eye. So I'd like you first to just notice, if you like, just notice that you have a head sitting on top of your body. You may get no feedback at all. You can, again, eyes are in peripheral, through your lashes, they're lowered to the ground or they're closed, whichever your preference, and they can shift and move. They don't have to stay in the same position. The first thing I'd like you to do, like I say, is just notice that you have a head up there. And it might just be that you're like, I know I have a head. I have no sense of there being something there, but I know I have one. So we have our face and our head sitting up there, atop our neck and our spinal column. And then just kind of checking that whatever position you're in, it feels kind of safe and comfortable, and you're not kind of really hunched forward or pulled back too far, that you're in a relatively comfortable position with your head. And that might be hard to tell, because then we go to proprioception. So just see if it feels like it's not causing you pain. That's a good thing. So I'd like you to just draw tiny little circles with the tip of your nose. So imagine you've dipped your nose in ink, if you like imagining, and you are drawing circles on a piece of paper. If you don't like imagining, you are going to look almost down at your nose and imagine you could just draw tiny little circles with the tip of your nose. You don't need to imagine, you can. Just. And if you want to look at me doing it, that's also okay, if that's something that's necessary for you to know what it is that I mean by little circles with the tip of your nose. You can see me doing it for a moment. So, and we can go the other way, draw the circles in the other direction, whichever direction you were going in. And make the circles really, really tiny. So there's not too much happening in the neck. And then we're going to tap with the tips of our fingers, and you're going to do this really, really gently and build up if you would like a bit more sensation, a bit more feedback, and you're not going to do it at all if you don't like it and it feels uncomfortable. So tapping, it's kind of, you know, it's a gentle pat with the tips of all the fingers on both or one hand, whatever you like. And we're going to start tapping just sort of above our eyebrows, so sort of on the forehead, just above our eyebrows. So you might even feel a little bit of the eyebrow hair on your fingers. We're not on our eyebrows, we're just above. And you might tap so gently, it's as gentle as you would if you were tapping on a baby's face. But you might build up the strength of the pressure to a place where you can feel the sensation and notice your forehead. And you might want to move around. So you might move your fingers up to your hairline and down to just above your eyebrows. And I'm really going to encourage you, don't do anything that causes any kind of pain, even if that means you don't get a lot of sensory feedback. Don't hurt yourself. And this might not feel okay, so then hands off, don't tap this place. I'm just going to move around to the ends of the eyebrows. We're not quite on the temples, because that's a really tender place, but just the kind of ends of the eyebrows. We might just use 2 fingers from each hand at the ends of the eyebrows. We can move around that kind of cheekbone. It's quite prominent on me, so I hope you can see it easily, to just under the eyes, but not on the fleshy part too close to the eyes, more onto the top of the cheekbone, and just kind of tapping there. Noticing the sensation of tapping. And I often notice that I tap too hard. And if I really take my attention there to listen in a way that doesn't feel overwhelming, it actually works for me to go a lot more gently than I thought I needed to. And it might be the other way around, or it might be really hard to tell. So just play with fast or slow or more firm or gentle tapping. And we're just noticing the place that your fingers are landing on. Noticing the sensations there in the cheekbones. And then moving down the jawline and into that little crease on the chin. And then we're going to move with both fingers up the head, all the way to the crown of the head. And because of the angle, in a way, you can kind of get all of your fingers involved, and even your thumbs, patting on the crown of the head, tapping rather on the crown of the head. Noticing the sensation. And you can start now to tip your chin down slightly so that you can pat down the back of the skull. I'm going to turn so you can see me if you want to look. Noticing the sensation. When we tap on the head, there's often a lot happening. You can really hear that noise. We can tap just behind the ears. So sort of with all our fingers, sort of on that bit of bone, bottom of the skull there. The occipital, the bit where it kind of bends into the neck, under the back of the skull. Just being really careful, like I say, we don't want to cause any kind of pain. You can come back over onto the forehead, down the sides of the face to the jaw again. Come down onto the chest if you like, upper part of the chest and just under the collarbone. I don't want to bang on the collarbone because that can be a bit painful, but just underneath. And you might like patting with the whole hand. You might like to just have your hand on the upper part of the chest, just feeling the warmth, perhaps some sense of friendliness in the way that you're touching yourself. Taking both hands, pinching the earlobes. If you have earrings, we'll move to the next bit quite quickly, and just giving the earlobes a little pull, just a really gentle tug, and then just kind of to the middle of the ear, the outer ear, the shell of the ear, and just pulling out slightly, and to the top of the upper ear and pulling up slightly. And then letting all of that go and letting your hands rest down noticing the hands, noticing the face, the cheeks, the forehead, top of the head, the back of the head, the right ear and the left ear. And then letting all of that go. And the last activity, I really love doing laying down. So if you've got a space to lay down where you can be really comfortable without your head too pressed up, or just in a way that feels really safe and comfortable for your body, please do. But this is also something that you can do sitting up. But I'd like you to be comfortable if that's possible. So just taking a moment or two to get comfy wherever you are. And you might want a quick sip of water, and just sitting or laying down in a position of your choice that feels comfy and cozy and warm enough for you. So one of the things that I think is really important when we think about meditating or practicing mindfulness is we're often asked to sit up in particular positions, and I think that has value if we're someone who has a tendency to fall asleep and dip out of connection and noticing. But as someone who experiences a lot of pain in my body, and you might be someone who does too, that actually sitting up isn't always available to everybody all the time. I think laying or at least partially laying or leaning back in an armchair, it's a myth that you can't practice mindfulness in other positions, in laying, even on your side, on your belly. For this, my preference, so that you can do the movements I'm going to suggest, is that you're either on your back, propped up in ways so you don't feel uncomfortable, or sitting. And again, there's bits of this that you might know if you've done things with me before, but it's also new bits. So wherever you are, have your hands facing up. So that might be that you're laying down and your hands are facing the ceiling, facing up, or they might be on your body facing up. They might be in your lap if you're sitting, or on a desk or on a cushion, but have them sort of facing up and as relaxed as is possible for you right now. So they're not in fists and they're not tensed. And you're just going to start to open and close your right hand. So when I say open and close, we're not making fists and we're not opening to the furthest point. In fact, we're probably only moving like a couple of centimeters, and we're just kind of touching the fingertips to the thumb and then opening out. So just kind of kissing the fingertips and the thumb together and then opening out. Just the right hand. Just opening and closing. And then we're going to bring in the right foot. And all it's going to do is flex at the ankle. So the toes are going to move towards the hand when the hand closes, and away from the hand when the hand opens. So the toes are just moving again, probably only a couple of centimeters. It's not a big movement. The toes are going towards the hand when the hand closes, and away from the hand when the hand opens. So the feet and the hand are kind of the foot and the hand are sort of syncing up, the right foot and the right hand. And we're going to bring in a third component. When the foot is pointing up and the hand is next closed, you're going to lift your eyes to the eyebrows and you're going to lower them towards your chin when the hand opens and the foot goes down. So the feet and the hand are going, the feet and the eyes are going up and down together. And again, the eye movement isn't big. So you're not going up into your head and down. It's just a little glance down and a little bit up. And you might get a bit out of sync, and that's okay. Just come back. The hand is open, the foot's down, the eyes are down. The hand is closed, the foot's up, the eyes are up. Hand is open, the foot's down, the eyes are down. The hand is closed, the foot's up, the eyes are up. Open and down, closed and up. Open and down, closed and up. See if your breath can start to move with that movement. It's not forcing anything, we're not making anything longer. The movement might get a little bit faster because it's going to kind of sync up with your breath. And you're going to do that in whatever way feels comfortable for you. In breath and out breath. Coming when you go up or down, whatever you feel most comfortable with. So you might breathe in and go up, breathe out and go down, or the opposite. Just timing the breath to the movement, or the movement to the breath. And then let that all go. And if there's anything to notice, notice the difference between the right side and the left side, the right hand and the left hand. Notice if there's any difference at all in the sensations you find in your right foot and in your left foot, in the right side of your face and the left side of your face. There might be, there might not be, that's absolutely fine, just noticing. We're going to do the whole thing now over on the left, so hopefully we know it a bit better. It can be a bit confusing, this one. So we're just opening and closing the hand, letting go of effort elsewhere in the shoulders or the jaw or the face that might have built up in trying to concentrate. So just touching the fingers to the thumb, just opening and closing. And then bringing in the movement with the foot. As the hand opens, the toes point down, flexing at the heel. As the hand closes, the toes point towards the hand. So the toes are just going away from the hand and towards the hand. Open hand, toes away, closed hand, toes towards. And then the eyes, closed hand, eyes up, open hand, eyes down. Foot up, eyes up, closed, foot down, eyes down, open. Foot up, eyes up, closed, foot down, eyes down, open. And then just bringing all three movements together, letting the breath come and go with the open and close of the hand, the movement of the foot and the eyes. You might want to breathe in as your hand closes and out as the hand opens, or the other way around, whatever feels comfortable to you. Just a couple more breaths there. Letting that go. Noticing the difference again between left and right, foot, hands, eyes, face. And just for a few rounds of breath, we'll do all of it together. So both hands close, both hands open, both hands close, feet and eyes go up. Both hands open, feet and hands flex, go down. Hands closed, eyes and feet up. Hands open, hands and feet down. And see if the breath can just come and go easily with the movement with the breath. Letting that all go. And just noticing the right foot, the left foot, right hand, right side of the face and eye, left side of the face and eye. Noticing what's happening with any thoughts or judgments. Are they there? Are they quiet? Noticing what's happening with any other sensations, any sounds, inside the body, outside of the body, any emotions, as if you were asking a friend how they were. How are you feeling? What are you thinking? How is your body? Friendly noticing. You might notice a lot, you might notice nothing. It's okay to say to a friend, I don't know. It's okay to tell a friend a lot. Letting the noticing go. If you are laying down and you'd like to come and sit up, you can roll onto your side, do things slowly. If you're sitting, you might like to just shift and move a little bit from left to right. You might like to do the little interrupted breaths, 2 sniffs in, a sigh out. And this is the kind of part of the workshop where I kind of invite you to leave, if you'd like to do that, to